Natalie, thank you so much for joining us on the WeHero Learn series. We're so excited to talk about so many things, but mainly this really popular topic around sustainability and what 2022 is going to look like for all these companies that we're trying to support right now. And so thank you so much again for being here. And maybe just as a warm up, if you could share a little bit of background about yourself, who you are and how you got into this world and maybe what you're currently focused on, that'd be really good for our listeners, just so they understand a little bit more about what you're here and to do and what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. As Ben said, I'm Natalie Colvin. I'm currently a sustainability consultant, focused on strategy, B Corp certification, and just helping organizations along their sustainability journey. My background is a little bit of a winding road, like many people, but I've always been called to purpose-driven work. I started my career more in the service, social nonprofit space. But while I was living abroad, I really saw firsthand how important the environmental sustainability was to social well-being. And so that's when I started to integrate the environmental side and the social side of sustainability together. On that note, there is, sometimes people talk about sustainability and they only think about their environmental impact, but really I like to look at holistic sustainability, and that's something that's known as the triple bottom line. So there are three pillars to sustainable business or sustainable organization, and kind of like a three-legged stool, if one of those isn't strong, it'll fall over. And so those three legs of the stool are financial sustainability, must be financially stable, otherwise you fail, must be environmentally sustainable. And that's obviously the piece that people typically think of now when we talk about business sustainability. But then there's also the social side of sustainability. And I really see all three of those as integral to success. And so from the social nonprofit side, I realized it was around, I'd moved back from abroad, and it was around 2013. I realized that, if we were to have any hope of shifting all of these immense both environmental degradation we were facing and the social inequalities of the world, what we really needed to do was catalyze a movement of purpose-driven business. And so at that time, I went back to school and I got an MBA in sustainable business. And since then, I've kind of worked in product and supply chain and built my experience on what sustainable business would look like. And now focus, like I said, on helping companies make meaningful sustainability strategies, really focus on tying it to their mission and what they care about.
Thank you for sharing, because I think there's also just so many people that want to get into this career path. And so just understanding a little bit about your background and journey. And you brought up the three pillars, and you probably already know, just hearing that, we're going to dive into all three of those pillars to understand some of the core things that you're noticing. And one of the first questions I have, Natalie, is you mentioned the environmental sustainability piece and how that's a big focus for companies and something we all think of when we think of corporate sustainability. I want to know what goes into that, and maybe a better way to phrase it is, what do you see going into that? We hear about carbon offsets, we hear about waste, and I'm just really curious in your eyes what you're noticing in that pillar and what's been really popular activities for companies to partake in.
Yeah, it's kind of all over. And with my clients, I really like to take a personalized approach. And so asking the companies, organizations, what they really care about. Often right now, the biggest first step is measuring your carbon footprint. And so greenhouse gas emissions, which can be a super daunting task. It's not easy to know what the emissions are from, the inception of the materials you're making all the way through to the end of use of your customer, right? And are they throwing it away or are they recycling it? And is it even possible to do those things? And so there's a lot of great tools now that can kind of help with estimates. And most companies are working with pretty rough estimates. Those estimates are great, though. They give you a starting line. They let you see where your biggest impact is to be able to start to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions, and also just a framework for seeing your whole business, which is pretty cool. The Climate Neutral is a great organization that has a good tool. There's Greenhouse Gas Protocol has a great tool. The EPA has a great tool. There's a lot of resources out there, as well as, hiring consultants if you want to do a super deep dive. But there's different abilities to jump into measuring your greenhouse gas emissions. So that's probably the most popular way to jump in right now. It's a big issue, right? We all know that climate change is affecting everything we do, not only the well-being of our planet, but also the well-being of our businesses. And so I think that's definitely the number one trend in environmental sustainability right now.
Oh, Andy, you're on mute.
Do you see the trend of, once people understand what their impact is, do you see most people jumping into, okay, how do we alter our business to reduce the overall emissions? Or do you see most people looking for how do I just offset this, and not change my actual business?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of talk around offsets right now and how much good they're actually doing and what beneficial offsets are. And so I think that the first step is always offset. It just is. It's an easy, line item to add. But the question now is, are they effective and are they effective enough? And so the conversation has really turned to thinking about reducing and where can we improve our own impact and help our supply chain, both customers and suppliers, to reduce their impact, which is also our impact, right? Like as companies started to look at the holistic health of their business, it's just more and more, proving how interconnected everything is. The pandemic is a great example of that. We're all living in this interconnected world now, and we have to, help each other.
Jumping back out, Natalie, I'm so curious because in the broader view of the three pillars now, if we look at just this past year and what's been changing and so many companies trying to jump into this, which has been really exciting. I'm curious your perspective on what roadblocks you've seen for companies as they try to do this for any of those three pillars. Just what are the things that they're really challenged with and where they need support and help?
Yeah, that's a great question. Over the years, I have heard lots of excuses and roadblocks for why it's not the right time to jump into sustainability. I think that the most common is definitely time and money. Organizations think that jumping into these initiatives are going to cost a lot and they're going to take a lot of time. And while that may be true at the offset, in the long run, many of the programs and initiatives that you will start will actually save money and save time. And just staying ahead of legal requirements that might be coming down the pipeline and risk mitigation for your own business is a huge reason that this is worthwhile. It just comes down to doing the right research, setting priorities, taking a look at those cost analyses and deciding where the best place to get started is, and just making sure that you're looking into both what will matter for your individual organization and having, that wider positive impact to counter those, time and money restraints. Another super common roadblock is not knowing where to start. A lot of organizations, they come to me and they want to do better, they want to do more, but they have no idea what that looks like. And my main suggestion is just to start somewhere. Pick something that you're passionate about that really means something to your organization. And obviously, if you can hire outside help, hire a sustainability professional internally or a consultant. They can really help you identify where the biggest impact areas are and lowest hanging fruit is. But again, there's a lot of free or low cost tools that you can also use. As I mentioned, to measure greenhouse gases, there's great tools available. The B Impact Assessment, which is a B Corp tool that helps you kind of identify. It's the tool to get certified to be B Corp. But even if you don't want to be certified, you can go through that tool and it can help you identify any purpose-driven policies and practices, just great things to start to implement that a third party has recognized as, these are good for people and the environment. On that note, I also think that it's amazing to crowdsource your employees. It solves the where to start, the time, and the money. Not to mention that employees nowadays, they want to be doing this work, no matter if they're in, your accounting department or your product department. They're interested and they want their work to mean something. And they can get a lot done. It's amazing to see what passion-driven work can do in just a couple of hours a month. And just for employee morale, it's really great to give something to just shift their brains off of their normal tasks. So that's another huge recommendation that I make when companies have these roadblocks.
I'm really glad you mentioned just getting started somewhere. And also I'm glad you mentioned just employee buy-in and getting the employees involved. I was on a webinar earlier today, and they brought up eBay 20 years ago and how sustainability started at eBay. And it was a group of employees that were looking at their packaging going, do we still use styrofoam? Are we really still using this? Like, we could do better. And it was a group of employees. And then they started doing that with other things. And it was employees going like, oh, we could do better than this. And now they have a huge sustainability group at eBay. And I just share that as to make your point that, coming from employees and just starting somewhere, for them, it was styrofoam, and now they have a massive solar farm. And so I think that's just really, really important. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and you never know where your employees' passions lie, right? You could have an employee that in their free time is doing a ton of workers' rights work, and why not leverage that for within the organization?
Yeah. And another question I have for you too, Natalie, is related to that. You have these employees that are so passionate about this. They're knocking on the door, and a lot of companies are trying to figure out just what does a sustainability group or team look like in the organization. I'm really curious how you see sustainability teams evolving. Obviously, you get brought into these companies to solve some of these challenges and help orchestrate some of those teams. And I'm just really curious, what does a sustainability team look like, and how's it evolving?
Yeah, there's a couple of different belief systems here. You have some organizations that want full-on sustainability teams, and they want to manage things and have dedicated employees, and that's great. Not all organizations can do that. Like we said, sometimes the time and money resource is the roadblock. I do think, though, as we were mentioning, employees are looking for something different from their work these days than they were 20 years ago. There was, I believe it was a LinkedIn study from a couple of years ago that said that it was almost 90% of workers would actually take a pay cut to work at a company that aligned with their values. The company aligned with their own personal values. The company's values did. And I think that the last 2 years or year and a half have really amplified that. They're calling this time the Great Resignation, which is, kind of crazy. You see gas stations and restaurants that are understaffed. And it's really because employees want to do work that they feel is benefiting the broader society and the environment. And not only do they want to work for a company that aligns with their values, but they personally want to be integrated in that work. So you see a lot of workers going back to school or studying new things that maybe weren't even related to their old career. And so in that sense, I think integrating your sustainability initiatives, environmental and social, within the broader team is a really great practice right now. I think that it not only supports your initiatives, but it gives those employees that more than their day-to-day traditional job function would have been. It works really well because you also get to crowdsource and get a variety of ideas and perspectives, and you're not stuck with just 2 or 3 people making decisions for a whole organization. That being said, I really do think it's important to have someone, whether it's a consultant or someone internally, that's a dedicated person keeping things moving. You get going, and sadly, the sustainability initiatives are often the ones that get pushed aside. When time gets really tight, that's the thing that gets pushed to the back burner unless there's a deadline. And so if you have that one person that's checking in and keeping things, top of mind and making sure that they're still a priority and that they're moving, that's definitely the way that I see sustainability teams really functioning at a high level right now.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I love how you're kind of talk about incorporating the team, but you kind of need the driver behind the team. And we see that all the time in the social responsibility space. I'd be curious from the outside. Ben and I talk a lot about how we see these industries going through the life cycles. So we all of a sudden see, let's say, retail, everyone needs to be doing the sustainability trend. And I'd be curious, you're in the trenches. What do you see from like an industry dynamic standpoint, and which companies and what industry really need to be focused on this? And then I'd also be curious, do you ever see companies working together to better understand their sustainability in the industry, their supply chain, and things like that?
Yeah, great points. As far as industries go, I think it's important everywhere. I might be biased there, but definitely, no matter what industry a business is in, sustainability and environmental, I don't want to say issues, but challenges are going to become more and more important. If you're not already seeing it, you will soon, whether it's your supply chain being affected or your consumers starting to demand it, it's everywhere. And on the collaboration note, it's my favorite thing to do is to encourage organizations to work together, not only with other companies, with competitors, with industry organizations. Nonprofits are great partners. Academia is a great partner. Local government is a great partner. Anyone that has any sort of stake in the issues that a business is also looking into, they can be great partners. There's also a huge movement around doing things together. The Outdoor Industry Association has had a sustainability working group for going on 20 years now, and they've gotten, really hard competitors in the room together to try to solve these problems, and it has made a huge impact. So seeing it there now in the beauty space, there's a lot of really great coalitions, and then you get cross-industry collaboration going on just generally around packaging is a big one right now. I think that almost any industry has these groups that you can plug into, no matter what the interest or the initiative is. There's a great one in California around microplastics that, it literally has tire industry people, laundry industry people, apparel companies, it has government, it has academia, it has nonprofits. And sitting in those meetings, you really get to see the full scope of not only the problem, but the solutions. Because people are all thinking about it from a slightly different angle. And it's the best way to make real progress is to get everyone in a room and just start thinking of ideas. And it's working. So it gives me hope, those collaborations.
I love that. I'm so happy to hear you say it's working. We always need that ounce of positivity and good news, Natalie. So thank you, because we can get pretty negative pretty fast. I'd love to dive into the weeds a little bit around data and reporting. I talk to so many folks in this world that are really struggling with the data and the reporting. And I'm just curious if you have any pro tips for them, people that are in this role that are trying to do that reporting. What are things that can make their life easier? Because I see them pulling their hair out, see some people getting gray hair. So how can we help these folks?
Definitely. That is a huge pain point. Sustainability professionals have a lot of data to keep track of, and it comes from all over at all times. Sadly, there's not any great tools out there to help. There's different project management systems if that's the way an individual likes to work. But the biggest tips I have are keeping everything extremely organized. And because most things are in Excel sheets and they have to be passed, from suppliers or from different teams within an organization. And again, that one person I was talking about that's kind of leading the charge on some of these initiatives, I think one of their biggest jobs is making sure that the steps are clear. Everyone understands how the organization should be laid out, like a clear step-by-step guide. So anyone who's touching this information will know. The worst thing that happens is you get someone in a document and they don't understand how it was supposed to be organized or what it was exactly supposed to be for, and they start putting other things in, and then you have to go back and clean it up. I've seen that happen too many times to count, and it's really unfortunate. Go back and redo all of that great work. And so those, SOPs, the standard operating procedures, keeping track of those as you're keeping track of all of the data that you need. Keeping deadlines. Deadlines and timelines are another huge recommendation I have, especially if you're working with international supply chains or partners, because those timelines, they change and everyone, is on different schedules. And knowing, okay, in October every year, we're going to be, needing to collect this data. Here's the step-by-step for how to do it. And then, the follow through and reevaluating those processes is another big recommendation. So at the end of every data collection period, whether that's, the end of the year for some of these greenhouse gas things or the end of the season for different, product things. It's evaluating, did that work? What worked good about it? What didn't work about it? And evolving those. And hopefully soon there will be tools to help manage more of these things and integrate all of the data collection together. But so far it's just there's not a silver bullet yet.
Yeah, I think everyone struggles with the reporting when there's not a universal tool. I'd be curious, the whole goal of, reporting is to see how you're progressing. And let's say you're dealing with a company who's just jumping in. How do you help them set goals? And how aggressive do you try to get them to be? Are you typically advising, hey, I want you to, get 50% of all of your sustainability initiatives done in the first year? Or is it normally a slower ramp? Like if you were a company starting this, how would you set your goals?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've come across some clients who don't want to set any goals until they know all of their baselines. And that's one way to approach it. Obviously it takes a little longer to get to those goals, but once you have them, they can be more meaningful in the sense that they're tied to data and science-based initiatives. But going back to what I said earlier, just getting started is really important. And some organizations and people, they need that kind of goal out there, like what they're reaching for before they can get started. And so when I was working with a footwear client previously, we decided to make a goal to increase the recycled content of the product, right? And we didn't know what it was at currently, so we didn't put a specific percentage on it. What we did was we took one of the lines and said, this line will be 100% recycled for the upper by, it was 2022 at that point. So kind of breaking down the goals into little bite-sized pieces is a good recommendation. I also think that different teams have different ideas, right? Like they might already have an initiative that they're really excited about or a goal that they want to try to work towards. And so that's something I leverage a lot. If employees are already excited about it, then I can help and see, is it feasible? What would the cost analysis be? Because some of these goals are set without really knowing what it will take to get there. And that, step by step and year by year road mapping is something that is really important for companies to be able to see before committing to, sustainability goals. And the market's always changing, right? So that's the thing you need to know about these sustainability goals is that sometimes you have a goal and you're on track. And then like right now, there isn't enough organic cotton for companies to meet that goal. There's just not. So you're going to have a ton of companies that are going to be trying to figure out what to do and what's the next best step. And, I've been recommending there's in conversion organic cotton. It's basically farms that are trying to get certified for organic, but it takes a certain number of years. And so our, kind of Band-Aid solution, because there's not enough to buy, is to start supporting these farmers, which really helps them because they're already spending the extra money to be organic and they're not getting the benefit of it. And so it's kind of a great win-win that we were able to figure out within the supply chain of the specific company.
That's an awesome example of being creative and also probably helping the social leg of the stool as well as those farms invest and try to convert. I have a question. I think a lot of companies and a lot of managements are probably justifying this by the improvement to their brand, improvement to sales that come with being sustainable. How do you advise companies to market this? When do you market it? Do you market it when you start the initiatives, when you make impacts? Or how would you approach that if you were sitting in the company's seat?
Yeah, that's a great question. Companies get very nervous about, well, there's two kinds, right? Some companies get very nervous about talking about the environmental programs and initiatives they have, and then others want to start talking about it before anything's even been done. And I kind of advise both groups the same way. 100% transparency as much as possible is good for everyone. I think that a big shift that's coming is consumers understand where our products are coming from now and what's going on within organizations a lot more than ever before. And the second that they, find out about good things or bad things, it's all over. And it's going to be whether you talk about it or not. And so I think that in the spirit of being as transparent as possible, I think people should start talking about it. They should talk also about why it's really hard. because consumers don't understand. A small brand that just doesn't have enough influence within their supply chain can't get the same prices on sustainable materials, for example, as a big like Target can. And neither is good or bad, but there's different things and different challenges no matter where you are. And that's a piece, I think, in the marketing of sustainability that is missing. And consumers care. They understand. They're not looking for perfect anymore. They're looking for progress. And so if you start to talk about your progress and your journey, it's all a journey. And I think as individuals, a lot of us are going through our own personal growth journeys, and just to be relatable as a company and talk about your journey and where it came from and the values behind it, it really goes a long way. And not enough organizations are doing it yet. So that's kind of my marketing spiel. We'll see if more and more companies will pick up on it.
To double click on a point, you touched a little bit on it, Natalie, and I have a hunch, but to that party of companies that have the nervousness about talking about it, where is that stemming from? If we can go a little bit more into that.
Yeah, I think it stems from the greenwashing backlash that a lot of companies were getting about 20 years ago. People were doing things that they said were sustainable that weren't. The other thing is, once you start to dig into this, no matter what industry you're in, if you haven't built your company 100% based on making the best choice for the environment and the social, there will be areas where you're not perfect, where you're not doing the best thing. And that's okay, right? That's kind of what I was saying about being transparent and talking about your priorities and where they fall and why they fall that way is really, really important. But once you start to unpack that, no matter what, you'll get someone who cares about an issue differently than you do. And they might be a vocal consumer. They might give pushback, right? And it just depends on what level that pushback comes to. People reference the Nike in the early 90s with the sweatshops, right? Like that was the big first greenwashing, even though it wasn't greenwashing because no one was claiming that they were sustainable in that area. But what happened after the big pushback for Nike having all these sweatshops in Asia was that they started looking. And I think it was one of the best things to happen to the apparel industry as far as in terms of sustainability. And that's because customers and nonprofits and outside society, they see things differently and they can bring up issues in a way that a company might not think. And now I'm kind of off on a tangent, but bringing it back, when you start marketing things, you open your business up to that scrutiny. But I don't think it's a bad thing. It's kind of my point there to bring it back.
And I love how, like, to go back to your Nike example, how Phil Knight talks about he's so glad that happened. Not that the sweatshops were happening, but that awareness generated because he was unaware and their leadership was unaware. And like to your point, just having that awareness and having that sounding block is almost a really good thing.
Yeah, there's a push, I think. So we call them bomb thrower nonprofits, and they're the ones who want to make a big scene and like, oh, this is awful. Look how awful all these companies are. And there's a way to work with organizations. And I don't know if, depending on the organization, what impact they need. Do they need the bomb thrower to get them to wake up and see an issue or not? But working together is something that I always recommend as well. So if a nonprofit or a customer brings up an issue to you that they're really concerned about, ask them why, ask them if they have any recommendations for solutions or know how you can start to get involved in it. Just like employees, individuals as consumers like that, they're having an impact, and it feels good to know that you're making a small change, whatever that is.
Yeah. If we can stay on that point, because I think the nonprofit piece is really critical here, because I think we can do this to, and we can do this for, which both I think are wrong. I think we can do this with. And I think doing this with the really good nonprofits is critical. Also, I just think for employee education and bringing your entire company along for the ride, nonprofits do such a good job at that. I'm curious if you have any tips on, identifying really good nonprofits, partnering with really good nonprofits, just your experience there. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I always recommend going back to the organization's core values and mission. And finding nonprofits that align with those are always most impactful. There's definitely opportunity to broaden that. So if you're working on a specific issue, the microplastics issue, for example, finding international recognized nonprofits that can kind of help fill a gap if they're actually doing the work on the ground that you wish you could be doing, or if they're doing the research to provide more background information and more science behind it. Those are great nonprofits to support. There's also a lot of great like third-party nonprofit vetting systems that you can use as far as making sure that the nonprofits are actually doing what they say that they're doing. And those are really great to do. I think that, working with organizations like WeHero to help facilitate those partnerships is really awesome as well.
I've got kind of a fun question here for you. I think Ben and I always joke back and forth about our favorite sustainable brands. If you had to pick, a company that you think is pioneering in sustainability, and that you really would throw your chips in as, a brand that really impresses you, I'd love to hear that. But I'd also love to hear, one of the things that comes out across this whole conversation is, nobody's perfect. We're all working on things, and that's okay. We can't expect miracles overnight. I'd love to hear a brand that you think, is really investing in this and committed to it, and is coming from a place that's not so sustainable, but going to end up in a really impressive place.
Yeah, great questions. To answer your second question first, I have a couple of unexpected ones that people don't think about. But the work behind the scenes that Target is doing is pretty cool, and it's potentially not going to show for a couple of years, maybe too many years, to be honest, in my opinion. But the starting of moving away and creating a circular economy because sustainability right now, unfortunately, is often seen as a luxury, right? Sustainable items cost more most of the time. And Target's really looking at how to shift that. They have a lot of, more affordable options, and they want to create everything that they do out of the same sustainability standards, which is, more power to them. That's going to be great. Again, like I said, it probably won't trickle down for, I don't know, hopefully sooner than I think. But so Target's doing a lot of really good work behind the scenes and research, and also sharing all of that work, which is pretty cool. So they're one that you can watch. Another one that swings so far both ways, so I don't want to talk about it, but Amazon's really got some great initiatives. Yes, they should be doing way more for how much money they have. I agree with all of that. I definitely think that the promoting of consumer culture and like having to have it now, all of that is awful. But within that, I like to talk about how they're thinking outside the box. Some of the things that they've started doing as far as with returns, for example, now you can take your returns to Whole Foods or to a UPS store, and they all get put in big boxes. And within, shipping and returns, the amount of small little things that have to happen is actually where most of the impact comes. And so by consolidating all of that into one big shipper, instead of all of the little trips, that used to happen to and from individuals' homes, that's a big kind of outside of the box thinking. People weren't really doing that yet. And they've adopted it and ran with it. And the great thing about Amazon is that when they decide to do something, it happens pretty quickly. They have a huge sustainability team too. So I'm hoping that is helping. But again, there's just like I was talking about earlier, people like to talk about the bad, right? And focus on, but all of these things are awful. And how could you do that? And yes, if you have the means, support local, support 100% sustainable. B Corps are a great standard. But if you can't, there's still ways to help individual organizations be more sustainable. Let's see, as far as really fun, sustainable brands that I support, my big push recently has been local and as local as possible. And so for my personal shopping, I buy almost everything I can at farmers markets or small luckily right now I'm in a big city, and so it's been easy. But kind of limiting the impact on that, and not only that the business is based local, but that they are supporting local. So the inputs to whatever they're making is also local. And so those are mostly, small organizations. Of course, you have Patagonia that pioneers great sustainability. Patagonia's advocacy is top notch. The way that they engage consumers around advocacy and actually follow through, that's an area that a lot of organizations, they just don't know what to do, right? They don't know how to engage in advocacy. So they're someone that I've been really following recently too.
All great answers. I appreciate the out of the box and good, helpful tips for both Ben and I think.
I have a personal question. I'm trying to shop more locally as well, Natalie. And I'm curious, you brought up a great point, not just shopping local, but also supporting local vendors that source locally as well. How do you determine that? Do you ask like the employees? I'm really curious how you go about that.
Yeah, if you're at a farmer's market or actually engaging with someone, just start asking them, because it's great, because then they start to also know that you care. The other way, if I'm looking at things online, there's almost always like a way to see made in. So then you can at least know, you can start to get an idea of the supply chain. But my best way is just asking. I love reaching out to, especially small brands. I think that the responses you get back are really heartfelt and personal, and you get to know the brands a little bit better. There's a local tea company that, I always ask, and some of her, her materials or her inputs are coming from international because it's the best, quality or whatever her reasoning is. But she's always really great about trying to tell me which ones are local, and she knows that I'm on this journey and she's on the journey too. And so we have kind of a great relationship about it. And she points out what I'm looking for and helps me with that.
Perfect. I'm going to ask a lot more questions. My farmer's market better be ready.
It's fun. And then you just get to have that, especially right now, we all have to have masks on when we're talking to people in person. And so if you can ask questions that get people to have, that energy that a smile would normally do, that's kind of been this summer, that's been my goal, is to get people's energy to lift without having them see a smile.
I love that. I'm curious, Natalie, as 2022 is just right around the corner, which seems crazy, but what are things that you think sustainability leaders should be considering as we go into this next year? Any things that you want to flag for the folks that are listening to this?
Yeah. As you were talking about earlier, Ben, there's a lot of doom and gloom when we start talking about climate and the environment and what's happening and what's not happening. And the biggest thing that I want anyone, whether you're a business leader or consumer or just a random person who's watching this video, to take away is that we have to have hope, and we have to think that there are solutions, and we have to all still be doing what we can be doing. One of the biggest things for business leaders that I see happening right now, that I hope will continue, is this idea of a whole market transformation. And a market transformation, it can't happen unless individual businesses are the force making that transformation. Instead of waiting for consumer demand to shift the market or regulations to shift the market, businesses are starting that movement on their own. You can see it happening in areas like the B Corp movement. In 2020, 16,000 companies started the B Impact Assessment. And prior to 2020, I think they'd been in, at least 10 years, I believe, that they've been running it. There was only 4,000 certified, right? So that number is huge. The interest is growing, the movement is growing, and this market transformation, it's going to be, I don't want to say it's going to be hard, because it's going to be fun as long as you're ready for it, right? Like, it's going to be overhauling systems that no longer work. So why are we still using them? And discarding these outdated beliefs that people have about, our environment is a limitless source of whatever we need, right? We can just take from it, or thinking that the environment is just a black hole for our waste. Like, these beliefs that we all consciously, when you think about it, you're like, no, that's not true. But that's how our economic system is still being run. And so this market transformation will turn all this on its head, not to mention the social inequality and the global inequality that we've been seeing. All of this it's just ready to be shifted. And I really think that a sustainability leader who's a purpose-driven or wants to run a purpose-driven organization should be asking themselves, first, what outdated beliefs am I running on? What can I start to shift within my own belief system? And then take that to the organization. What outdated beliefs is my organization still running on? Even better, can we start to shift our business to work without these outdated beliefs? Or how can we start to be a catalyst to shift other people's outdated beliefs? It's gonna have a lot of out of the box thinking and moving beyond linear models of take, make, waste that we've seen to a more circular economy, working really closely with our supply chain partners and collaborating like we talked about. Collaborating is going to be huge as we move into this new shift. And I think that this far greater transparency idea with consumers, with your supply chain, with competitors even, get all that information out there so that everyone can be a part of the solution. That's going to be a real big part of this market transformation as well. And then just keeping that hope, right? Doing everything from a place of knowing that there are solutions and that, that we're not screwed, right? Yes, 2030 is coming and that's, a big, scary deadline. But we can't live in a world that says there's no solution. At least I can't. So I hope that business leaders are also living from a place of this hope.
Yeah, I just love that you bring so much passion and inspiration to this. And I think that's exactly what we needed to hear as we talk about next year, which is always scary. But I thank you for
especially now.
Yeah. So thank you so much for just bringing so much inspiration into our lives and into this. And we appreciate you. And one of the many reasons we wanted you to join Andy and I. Andy, did you have any other questions?
No other questions from my end. All I can say is we are one of those companies in pending B Corp. We've been waiting a year for our final evaluation. And so it's, every time we get an update email from B Corp where it says, hey, just so you know, we're trying our best, but we have this many applicants. I always forward it around to our entire team and I say, hey, just an update here, but what an awesome update that this many people are trying to do something so necessary, in my opinion. It's a really positive trend.
Yeah, great viewpoint, Andy. A lot of organizations I work with are just impatient.
Natalie, where can more people learn about you? Where can people get in touch with you? What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, definitely. My LinkedIn profile is just Natalie Colvin, LinkedIn. I've been working tightly with an organization called Everroot. And so I am on staff for their consulting firm. So it's everrootconsulting.com. Those are probably the best two ways. Anyone at all can email me or any questions. Love to talk to you. I don't have, I am my own product, right? So feel free to come and ask me all the questions that I've been asking all of the suppliers and the people that I engage with. So feel free to bug me on that same amount.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for just taking the time to educate us. I always learn so much every time I get to have a phone call with you. Look forward to the day we get to meet up in person. But thank you again, sincerely, for educating us, for sharing your wisdom, and just that sense of hope and inspiration that you give us. I really appreciate you for that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you both for including me. This is great.
Thank you so much.